Hi everyone, just before we get into this episode of Type 1 I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much for pressing play. I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you do, don't forget to hit subscribe and you'll be notified when new episodes come about. You can find us across podcast land on Spotify, iTunes, all those good places as well. Secondly, anything you hear on this podcast should not be taken as medical advice. I am, of course, not a professional, and you do need to seek advice from your healthcare team before making any changes to your diabetes management. And lastly, if you want to say hello, I do have an Instagram page specifically for the Type 1 podcast. You can find it at Studio Type 1. That's at Studio Type 1, the number, on 1, the number. And you can also come and say hello and follow me on my personal page, which is at Miss Jen Grieves. And all of that will be noted in the episode description. Hi everyone, and welcome to Type 1, a podcast that delves into the obscure, complex and challenging world of life with Type 1 diabetes. I'm Jen Grieves, and each week, with the help of some brilliant guests, I'll be showing that there is no normal when it comes to handling this whopper of a chronic condition, because we're all pretty much figuring out the messiness of day-to-day life with diabetes as we go. And most of all, even though it doesn't always feel like it, we are absolutely not alone. My guest today is Abby Lyons. Abby is a business owner and mum of 3 boys, originally from Manchester, but now living in Dubai, where she runs an international marketing agency alongside her co-founder. So life was already very busy for Abby as a mum and business owner when her youngest son, Rocco, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at just 2 years old in 2020. 5 years on, and Abby has written and published a children's book called What is Diabetes Anyway? To raise awareness and help other families trying to figure out this very tricky condition. Welcome to Type 1, Abby.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you so much for being here. I mean, we got to chatting and jumped straight into it, and I already know that we could have spoken for hours. So I was like, we should probably press record here. But it is one of those things when you get to speaking to someone who gets it, it's like, oh, this is really important, which is why this podcast is here and why I'm so thankful for you as a parent for speaking to me today. So how are you doing? First of all, how are things? Big question.
I'm good. I'm sane. It's Ramadan here in the UAE, so the school hours are less. It's very short days for the children. So we're just trying to pack everything into small amounts of time. So I've sent them off to golf so we have some peace and quiet to get on and do this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Life does sound very full on for you. You sound like you've got your hands full before you bring type 1 diabetes into the mix.
Mum of 3 boys, it's a lot. So I've got 13, 11, and then Rocco, who's 7. So yeah, it's teenage years are interesting. Diabetes years are always interesting. It feels like a year and a day. And then Maddox, my middle son, is actually, I keep saying, you just keep being cool. Like, let's not have anything happen. This is great.
Oh, bless you. Wow. I mean, I always say it. I think parents of children with type 1 diabetes are absolute rock stars. I do think you have it tougher than us. And you know, that's not a nice thing to say, but I just mean that as in, like, I know parents carry a lot of, well, it's not me, I don't live with it, from the parents that I've spoken to, but I just have so much respect for you.
Thank you.
So yeah, I would like to take it back to 2020, if that's okay.
Yes, of course.
Just set the scene a little bit for what life looked like for you guys. You know, you're a family living out there in Dubai, but you already had a lot going on before type 1 entered the picture.
Yeah, so 3 boys. I'd set up my own marketing agency. In Dubai, it's quite difficult when you go on maternity leave. There used to be 4 weeks maternity leave. So obviously, as a new mom, that wasn't very much. So with my first son, I actually then set up my own business when I went back from maternity leave, just to get a bit of flexibility. And thank goodness I did, because what I have on my plate now, trying to do that and work a 9 to 5 and be answerable to anyone would just be impossible. So I'm very, very grateful that I did that. So had the three boys, had Rocco, he was 2, living out in Dubai. We have been here 16 years now, so would have been 11 years. So had a good friendship base. We'd made our own kind of family here. And my mum would spend a lot of time here, normally 2-3 months of the year in Dubai. So, still had quite a lot of support. And the good thing was nannies. So I don't think I could do what I did then or what I do now without them. One of my nannies has been with me since Rocco was diagnosed, very much a part of the family, and has learned as I have learned. So, that, although I'll never fully trust anyone except myself, and I don't fully trust myself, it's so amazing to have that level of support. So yeah, life was crazy.
Yeah. And then type
And
1
then,
diabetes starts to make itself
yeah,
known. So what did that look like? I mean, Rocco was 2, so
he was 2. I knew nothing about diabetes. I was working full time, had the 2 boys, had 4-year break before we had Rocco. So it was very overwhelming, I think, going back to toddler years. And you forget a lot of what it was like. So the older 2 were pretty self-sufficient. Rocco was a 2-year-old. He would eat a lot. And I remember thinking, God, he eats so much. He had 3 full Weetabix for breakfast. And I was like, I'm sure the boys never had that much. But you're so busy, you don't really think about it. He was drinking a lot of water, but we're in Dubai, it's hot. And then I would notice he'd fall asleep a lot at feeding times, would generally be a bit more low energy. I was saying earlier, he would wake up from his nap and he'd be a little bit wobbly. And I would look at him and I can see it in my head. I can see him walking towards me and he's a bit all over the place. I was like, my intuition tells me that's not quite right, but you don't know as a mother, especially with healthcare in the UAE, is so good. I can phone 20 doctors within a 5-mile radius now and get an appointment. I can walk into a hospital and be seen within half an hour. So you, as a parent, you do become a little bit, I'll just get it checked. And then by the 3rd child, I was a bit like, I should know what I'm doing here now. I need to stop being so paranoid. But when I saw him fall over, I thought, I'm going to get this checked. So I took him to hospital. I don't even know what test they did. They mustn't have done a blood test, but they checked him over. By this point, he's eating. So obviously he'd had low blood sugar. His sugar must have been coming up and he was fine. And then I'm watching him run around the hospital and they're all looking at me as if to say, he looks fine to us. I was like, I'll take him home. But that feeling never really left. And then a couple of weeks later, he was 2, so he was out of nappies, but at night he would have a nappy on. And I picked him up from nursery and they said, oh, he's got a really bad nappy rash. I was like, really? He's not even in nappies apart from nighttime. And I looked and he was a really aggressive looking start of a rash. So I left it a few days and then I took him to my doctor, who gave me some cream and just, it's fungal nappy rash. It's got infected. That's probably why it spread. Don't worry about it. Just put this cream on and it'll be fine. And then I was actually traveling. My mum had flown to Dubai. She was with the kids. I was in the UK. And my mum said to me, you know what, Rocco's still not right. He's crying. He's just vomited. I'm going to take him back to the doctor. She knew the doctor as well. And we got a call from the doctor saying, I think you need to come back. I'm really concerned that he might have type 1. And I don't want to test for it right now because I want you to be here, but you need to be back. So we got on a plane. I think it was like 5 o'clock in the morning. We got on a plane. And he said, make sure he's fasted. I want to test his urine, not fasted. So I am researching everything, what can give a child high blood sugar. And I'm looking at medicines. Oh, he had that medicine. Yeah, that's what it will be. It will be, he had pulmicort that can cause high blood sugar. He's definitely can't be type 1 diabetes. He's obviously not. And we were convincing ourselves, he's definitely not. He's definitely not. We took him to the doctor. They did a urine test. They were like, you need to go straight to the hospital. I was like, right, okay, this is going to be okay. We're all going to be okay. Nothing bad has ever happened. It's going to be okay. Obviously, he's not got type 1 diabetes. I didn't even Google it. I was like, no. We got to the hospital. They took his blood. And even trying to get his blood out, I think his blood was like 700-800. It was like border. How he was still awake, I don't know. I'm so grateful for. So the doctor pulls me to one side and says, oh, it's diabetes. Just like it was the flu or, he's got a virus. Or I was like, right. I was like, and then I Google it. Type 1, non-curable. Type 2, reversible. Oh, is it type 2? No. Well, it must be type 2. He's not got an incurable disease. And they're just looking at me. Meanwhile, we're in this emergency department of a really well-known hospital and he was hungry. So my husband at the time had gone to the canteen to get him some pasta. And he was sat in the hospital bed eating pasta while his blood sugar was around 700-800. And they were just letting him. So he's in the hospital bed. They've just told me, And I've got a picture of it. He sat eating pasta. And I look back and I'm like, you could have killed him without. I still don't understand. So he was admitted. The hospital where we would normally have gone, the endocrinologist was away, so they wouldn't admit him, which to this day kills me a bit, because I do think this would have been a lot easier if I'd have been in the hospital where I'd given birth to my 3 kids. I knew the doctors, I was really comfortable there, and they've got great doctors, but we weren't. So they admit us, and then they say, you'll be here for 4 days and we'll give you training and we'll tell you how to deal with this. So I'm massively sleep deprived from the travel back and then the trauma. And it was basically 4 days in a hospital where there was no educator. They were on holiday. And it was quite a young girl who was trying to stand in for her, whose English wasn't her first language. And a really, really abrupt doctor who had no empathy, who had no, I was a wreck. She found me crying in the bathroom floor in his room. Like, I was really, really like, no.
And I guess you're looking for answers at this point as well, going through this absolute trauma. You've got the thousands of miles that you've traveled, not knowing what's going on, and this word that's floating around that you're determined he doesn't have, because that's your baby, and why you don't want that for your child, of course. And you're not getting the answers that actually you really need.
I met with like somebody who's looking at it's a bit like someone has just said to me, you've got a flu, take some paracetamol. This is like it was that normal to them, which it is. I guess they do this a lot. But Rocco is in bed, and looking back now, he's so thin. He was so thin, but you don't know. And every parent I know says the same, that pre-diagnosis, how do we not know that their bodies are starving? Like, how do we not know? And he's in hospital and he's hooked up to everything. He's crying and he wants to eat, and they're telling me he can't eat. And I'm like, what do you mean he can't eat? I've got to feed my child. And it was just this endless roller coaster of traumas where nobody could really explain it. I've got all of my family contacting me saying, what's going on? Because I've been back in the UK. I've got his brothers at home saying, Mummy, what's going on? I didn't know what to say. And it was like every time I had to say it to someone, they would then come back with their own emotion over it. So then you're lambasted in everyone else's emotion of like they're pouring it all over you because they're in shock and they love him too. And you're just like, no, right, everyone, leave me alone. I can't process this. And it's instant, right? It's not like they go, he's got type 1 in a couple of weeks. Once you're up to speed, we'll start dealing with this. Until then, we'll put it on hold. It's like, no, from this second, they were saying, you need to count his carbs. You need to understand what's going in. You need to dose his insulin. We can't do that for you. And I was like, what? So they literally came in, right? So for dinner that night, they came in with the menu. So this is, he's been diagnosed. He's in hospital. They come in with a kids menu, which is pizza, chicken nuggets, burgers, pasta. I'm like, I don't really understand. They said, just pick whatever you want, because it's a nurse and she knows nothing about diabetes. So I'm trusting the nurse that's on duty. So I ordered chicken nuggets and they show me how to count them. There's 4 nuggets. So I dose it, whatever. Obviously, it's having no impact. His blood sugar's 700. So he's obviously on a drip to try and get that down. The next night they come back. What does he want? Chicken nuggets. This time there's 6 in a portion. But they told me the total carbs, not per nugget, for the portion. I'm like, well, you're setting me up to fail here because you're giving me different portion sizes every night. I don't know. And it was like the lack of cohesion between a medical treatment plan and a holistic treatment plan, which this food can kill him. Let's get on the same page here. There was none of it. And I don't think that has changed still, which is why for me, the rage that it brings out in me when I hear kids still going to the emergency rooms, still not being able to diagnose, they still don't do finger pricks. Why are they not getting these children? This is a symptom. Let's just finger prick because we'll know in 5 seconds. I don't understand.
Yeah, such a simple thing. Yeah.
So simple.
And you're the one out here kind of trying to get to grips with all this, not to mention like the dose amounts, like this precious medication that is so life-saving, but at the same time, you need to dose the right amount, and that's your baby. Yeah, my goodness me. I can see the fire in you to, like, I'm assuming where this book has come from and everything, to make sure that other parents don't have to have this entry point to the condition. And all the while you've got your baby boy and your other boys as well, like you're still a mother, you're still a business owner, life is still moving forward, whether you want it to or not.
Yeah.
How did you then start to kind of get to grips? I know like you just kind of have to, and I think that a lot of parents have been through this, and
Yeah.
myself as well. Like people are like, how do you do it? And you're like, well, what's the alternative?
Yeah.
But in terms of getting to grips with the reality of it and having
Yeah.
to shield those other people and say to other people, well, he's got type 1 diabetes, like how did you start to piece that all together? Where did you gather the information and start to move forward, I guess, for yourself as a mother?
Yeah. I think, I think it's a bit of like fake it till you make it. If it had been me with the condition, I think I would have wallowed in that for quite some time. As a parent, as you say, you have no choice. Like my child needed me to keep him alive. And at some point, very quickly, that kicked in. Well, let's be honest. At first, I refused to take him home from hospital. I had a bit of a fight with the doctor saying, no, I can't keep him alive, so I'm not taking him home. And she's
No,
like,
fair enough.
it's not really an option. I'm like, well, I was like, listen, I will take him home if you give me your mobile number so that if I don't know what to do, I can call you. And she was so resistant, which now I know is crazy because I have my doctor's WhatsApp numbers and every person I know has their doctor's WhatsApp numbers. They're there to support you. This is not a come for an appointment tomorrow. This is life or death in the moment. So I got her number and that's how they eventually got me to leave the hospital kicking and screaming. And they'd said to me, again, the educator wasn't there. They said to me, now sometimes he might go low. There might be a time where he goes low. Not he's probably going to go low 5-6 times a day because you're learning. And if he does, it's fine. They made it sound like at some point in his life, there might be a low that you have to deal with. So I wasn't really that worried about the lows because he'd been so high. So we got him home, put him in his car. He had the Libre, the first version of the Libre where you have to scan it. So I just sat in his room. And then about 3 hours in, I like plucked up the courage to scan him because I didn't want to know. I just didn't. And he was like 38, which is like, I do it on the different, I do it on the ML, but he was 38, which is like, okay, so they say
low.
Under 25 is a coma. Great. I am failing here. And I remember just screaming and his dad came in and I was just like, I was frozen. I was like cold inside, like, I don't want to do this. I can't do it. And for the first time in my life, I just wanted to run away from my child. And I didn't want to be responsible for him not surviving this. I just was like, I can't do this. And then I think the next day I woke up and I was like, right, just got to get a grip. And my approach to everything is if I've got the facts, if I've got information, I can handle anything no matter how bad it is. If I don't know or if I'm in the dark, I'm a mess. So it's like, right, information. And the first book I read was The World's Worst Diabetes Mom, Stacey Simmons. She's a huge podcaster and she does so much for the community. But I read that. My mum had come over and I read that with her. I was like, okay. So she took sense. She sounds like a very normal woman who also wanted to have a life. She went off to Las Vegas and left her son. I was like, okay, I could go to Vegas and leave him at some point. Yay, I can still go out with my friends. And, it's going to take time, but it will be okay at some point. So fine. And then I realized, he can eat and I can feed him. And nobody had said to me, everyone had said at the hospital, just eats normally. But how can he eat normally? And I know that he can eat normally, but they didn't explain how. What does that look like? Okay, so you might have to wait a bit longer for dinner, or you might have to space out that meal, or you might have to remove a carb if he's high, but everything on his plate can look the same as his brother's. If someone had said that to me, because I was researching diabetic recipes and everything is just with sweetener, or it's like, that doesn't make sense. Because nobody said it's just a matter of carb counting. And if you get the insulin in at the time that the food hits, you can eat anything. And so once I started to understand that, so I came home, I've got an amazing PA at work, and I did spreadsheets of like meal plans, and every food that he eats, I basically put into a spreadsheet, apricot, 5 grams is this many carbs. And I counted everything that he could ever eat with a portion size that I knew was okay for him. Then I got to the bagging. I bagged up so many low snacks, cranberries and chocolate and biscuits. My kitchen was like the Kardashians in terms of organization, but it didn't look pretty. It was like bags and bags and bags. There was nothing left in an original container. Pasta was weighed out, rice was weighed out, because I thought if I'm in an emergency situation, I know that fear that I'm going to get because I felt it last night. Therefore, I want to just be able to grab stuff and know that I know how to keep him alive if he goes low. The highs, I wasn't so bothered about. I was like, I don't want my son to go into a coma, so therefore this is what I need to do. So that organization, that planning, that research, reading, and finding a community here, that was the biggest thing, because it's a bit like when you're pregnant. You can talk to your non-pregnant friends and they're like, that sounds really nice. Oh, yeah, that must be hard. But when we get on this call, we've never met. We could sit for days, weeks, months, years, and just talk, because on a level, you get it and I get it. And there's very few people who we meet in this world that get it. And when someone gets something that affects you so deeply every second of every day, that connection is instant, and it's energizing, and it's safety more than your family or your friends can ever give you, because they love you and they're sad. At that point, they're just so sad. And you're like, oh, I get that you're sad, but can you stop it? Because I need to be more than sad. I need to handle this.
Put that sadness somewhere else and come
that's
to me.
Yours.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry. That's just so much. And like the way you got to grips with that so quickly, I mean, as you said, you just have to, but I mean, and it goes to show how important those first interactions are. And I've said that before, whether they instill positivity, education, calmness, or terror, fear, and the unknown, like that's worlds apart in terms of, that's all you've got to hang on to in that point, right? And then you go off with this new thing. And you say in the book, like, let me find it. Life tends to be broken into two parts: before diabetes and after diabetes. And you had that so clear there, just diving into this complete unknown and the help that you should have had for whatever reason, whatever circumstance. We can clearly see it wasn't there for you. It wasn't given to you.
But I think if it had have been, I wouldn't be able to help other people the way I feel I can now. So when new mums come onto the group, or there was a lady in November who I actually met 10 years ago in Dubai, we'd never really connected again. Somebody had told me that her son was just diagnosed, he's 8. So I instantly reached out to her, and she's a really open, beautiful soul. Like, she wanted the help. So it was like, I sent that night to the hospital, I sent dinner for them, I sent bags and bags of keto-based snacks, of Diet Coke, of everything that you would never normally give a kid, but you can have it as a type 1, meat and cheese. And I was like, listen, this will get you through the next few days. When you're out, I'll come and see you. And I prepared her a little snack thing, and I gave her all our measurements that we use. And it was like, and she says to me, I hate this. My sister died of cancer 3 years ago. I've had this. It's just too much. It's just too much. I was like, it is. And you don't have to feel bad for saying that. And, when you hear someone else express it, it's like, yeah, it is. And, other people would say to her, but you're so strong, you can do this. And, you wouldn't have been sent it if you could. And it's like, no, it's not okay. Whatever you say to me, this is not fair. And I said to her, I still have those moments all the time, a bit like you talked about earlier. Today I'm great, it's fine, diabetes, we're all cracking on. And today I do not know how to manage the sugars. I don't know why I've been awake for 5 hours tonight. I don't know why it won't come up or it won't go down, or because there's so much about the body that we don't know, and we're just guessing.
Yeah, we're just trying to do what we can. And how have you reconciled that for you as a mum who wants your boy to be okay and carry, these concerns for him, now that you've moved forward a bit from that time where, it's not okay. It really isn't okay in that moment. So where have you sort of got to now, having figured so much of this out for yourself and found the support in terms of, handling this beast as Rocco becomes, an outgoing and fun brother, son, all of it.
And he is wild. If you look at my 2 older boys, they're pretty calm and measured. And, if they get in trouble, I could probably tell you on one hand the amount of times I've shouted at his older brothers, and they would cry now. Rocco is so hardened by, I think, everything he's had to go through, and so resilient. He's just like, early bedtime, all right, oh, okay, sorry, love you. He's just, so much is water off a duck's back that then I'm like, oh God, I don't want him to be hard. And then I try and give him a bit of control. And I think, sorry, you asked me how I've reconciled it. I am a total control freak when it comes to his diabetes. And that's probably my next stage to work on, is I send one of the nannies to school with him. So I have somebody sat at school, because for me, I don't just want someone to dose insulin for his lunch. I want him to be in range. And it's not fair, I don't think, to put that pressure on a teacher or a teaching assistant who's got 25 other kids. And, my fear is always, what if one of those other kids has an accident and Rocco's got an urgent low blood sugar? What happens then? What if the nurse is busy with one of the other 1,000 children at the school? I can't live my day-to-day life without somebody being accountable for his health. And I know I'm in a lucky position to have that. And I've got 2 girls and they alternate. So sometimes they'll do the night for me. If I've got a big day at work, they'll do the night so that I can sleep, because if I don't sleep the next day, I'm not equipped with 3 kids anyway, without the diabetes. So I'm really lucky that I had that support. But for me, the way I've reconciled it is control. I will just do my best to learn as much as I can, to try as much as I can, to keep on top of his technology. Are we moving forward? Does he have the right things? While also making sure that he is not feeling controlled by me, because what I see with him sometimes is this need to take a bit of control. So then, like the pizza we talked about earlier, I'll say, you can have the pizza, but then later, don't come to me when I can't give you that, because my responsibility is to look after your body. And sometimes when he goes crazy, like, it's not fair, I'm like, you know what, Rocco, here's your PDM and here's your phone. You do it. You make the decisions then. If you don't like the decisions I'm making, I'll hand control over to you, because you're not listening to me and you've put that in your mouth and we've agreed you weren't going to eat it. So you try it. And then his little face, and I'm like, oh God, I'm a terrible human being. I've just made him feel awful. But at the same time, unfortunately, he has had to grow up a bit faster, because the decisions he makes will dictate how healthy he is in the future. And it's a big deal.
Yeah. So you were saying there that if it's pizza day on a Saturday, that if he
Yeah.
has the pizza, he
Yeah.
then can't then go on to have like snacks all afternoon. He has to kind of pick. And
Yeah.
I was trying to, like, I would come back with that. Like, that's where I've got to in my head. I'm in my 30s. I'm an adult. I've been living with this for a very long time. But I will pick the days where the admin or the
Yes.
extra kind of stress of following the consequences of those decisions are worth it, because it brings me happiness in other ways, or health in other ways, in the sense of being able to live my life. But knowing that I am monitoring it, that I am taking care of myself. I'm not just being like, okay, I'm not doing diabetes today. Like, I don't do that. And I think you're setting him up there, to reassure you, none of this is easy, and who knows what's best. And you can only know that for your child. And by having that open dialogue, I think that's fantastic. Like, that's something that we didn't really have in those, back when I was a kid. But just like everyone else in the world, you can have anything, but you can't have everything. Just as well on your
balance. It's like, we all want a balanced life, right? We all want those days where we go more this way or more this way, and then some days we're straight down the middle. But as soon as someone tells us no, but I want it. If I'm going to the gym and I've got a trainer and he's saying you can only eat this, well, I'm only want to eat this. Nobody wants to be told.
And meeting that, finding that, I think balance is completely elusive and just not, doesn't exist. I'm just either swinging one way or the other and trying to keep it all together while I do in life and diabetes and everything else. Mm-hmm. But I've noticed as well on your Instagram that you have quite open discussions with Rocco about mental health and the emotional side of all of this, which you seem very clued up on and very conscious of. And, at a young age, I just think that's so healthy. So can you speak to me a little bit, having myself come on a journey where I had to kind of figure out for myself more than 10 years in, when I'd gone way, way, way off course in my poor little mind, and I didn't even know, from the emotional impact of living with type 1 diabetes, having to find my way back. You are having these discussions and opening up that dialogue, and I really love to hear that. So I'd love to hear from your point of view how you approach those conversations and why that's important to you.
I think when you get to a certain age in life and certain things have happened to you, I think we all get to that stage where, okay, I think I'm ready for a bit of therapy now. And, I had a phase in my life where we're already much sooner than we want to admit it, but I'm a massive advocate for emotional intelligence and talking about your feelings and raising 3 boys. If anyone ever says to them, don't be a girl, stop crying, it's like, that is a bit of a red flag to the bull. It's like, expressing your emotions is the healthiest way to live your life. Otherwise, you get to an older age and you express everything through anger, because everything makes you feel angry. And you see so many men in their 40s and 50s and on maybe younger, that are so angry and that are so unable to talk about their emotions because their whole childhood life, don't be a girl, don't cry, pull yourself together. So for me, that was my mindset anyway before diabetes. I'd gone through a divorce, I'd lost my grandma, I'd lost my brother, I'd lost my dad. It was a really traumatic period of my life that I never really acknowledged, and I just carried on because, as we said earlier, you've got 3 kids. So for me, the decision to divorce, I'd come from a family where my mum and dad divorced when they were quite young, and a lot of my therapy was centered around inner child healing. Of, as a child, I knew something was wrong. I was 6, and I still can tell you now that feeling. It comes up to me so readily, that feeling in my gut of this is not okay. And my parents and my grandma were saying everything's fine. And I'm like, but I know it's not okay. But they're telling me it's fine, and I trust them, and they're my parents. So, okay, everything's fine. And it was very clearly not fine. And what happens is then you're brought up as a human that doesn't trust your own intuition, and you don't trust your instincts. So you don't trust yourself, and you're very easily manipulated, and this want to make sure that everyone else is always okay. And if I can make everyone else okay, then maybe I'll feel okay. And once I started to learn about this, when I was going through the divorce, myself and my ex-husband both agreed to be quite open with the children. And, they saw us both cry. They saw us both really go through the pain of the family breaking up while talking to them about it. So Rocco was 2, but Marley, must have been 9, 8, 9. So we had really honest conversations. We'll always be your mummy and daddy. We just won't be living together. And we tried to keep a lot of dialogue with them so they could talk about if they were sad, or we'd ask them a lot about how they were feeling. So from a young age, the 3 boys were really able to say how they felt. And I saw Marley going into his teenage years from about 11 with the hormones, saying, I just feel really angry and I don't know why. But he was able to express it, and then we were able to dig into it and have that conversation about, sometimes you feel a certain way and you don't know, but it doesn't mean that feeling is not valid. We can talk about this. And I had a bit of a moment a couple of weeks ago where the boys were just really stressing me out, and I was on the verge of tears. And Marley, my eldest, came over to me and gave me a hug and went, just let it out. And those, how many words? 3 words. I was just like, I am raising a human who is really going to do good in this world, because his gut instinct and his strength and his courage and his openness, it's okay, just let it out. And I did. And I said to him after, you know what, Marley, that was exactly what I needed. And Marley and Maddox and Rocco were all in the room. And then I spoke to Rocco about it afterwards, and I talked about dealing with your emotions. And I think the conversations with Rocco are the toughest because he has the most rage in him. He is the one who's like, no, shut up, or you're stupid. Or his instant go-to is that. And I often wonder if it's because of what he's been through in his life. So I talk to him about it a lot, and I say, how are you feeling? But where did you feel that anger? Was it in your heart? Was it in your throat? Let's talk about what it felt like, what led to it, what could we try and do differently next time? And he's really aware of it. So I think having open conversations for me is a non-negotiable, and that's with anyone in my life. So I've probably lost friends over the years, I've lost partners over the years, because I have an inability to, or I refuse to not have open and honest dialogues, and to not feel like what I'm feeling is valid. And as a woman of 43, that gets more and more difficult, right? Because in relationships, or, whatever the situation, a lot of people don't respond well to that. They like to be told what they want to hear, or they want someone who's much more, we always joke about it, me and my friends, and some of them are divorced, and it's like, the women 10 years younger than us are much more amenable sometimes to be like, yeah, and you're great, and that's brilliant. And we're like, God, if only we could be a bit more like that, maybe this wouldn't be so hard. But I think teaching your children to be confident in how they're feeling and able to talk about that is the biggest life skill you can give them. And especially with Rocco, because he is able to say to me, I hate diabetes. And I go, I do too, but got to do it. So let's cry. I'm not that sort of going, but it's great and you're lucky, and because it's not. And that would simply be a lie. And I refuse to lie to him.
Yeah. And there's something about opening up those conversations where you do acknowledge that this is kind of rubbish, or really rubbish a lot of the time, that I think helps. Speaking from my experience, to accept it. And I find it hard to walk between the line of this is a really serious condition that absolutely has the capacity to beat me down. But equally, I'm living a life that little 8-year-old Jenny couldn't have imagined, regardless of type 1 diabetes. But I think there are aspects of type 1 diabetes that have made me defiant in that way. You know,
I was going to ask you.
Anyway.
Yeah,
it's interesting. But I think acceptance is kind of, to me, it mirrors this absolute messy never doneness, never quite there-ness of life. It is just all part of one and the same. And that's not to say that I am just type 1 diabetes. It's not a defining thing in my life, but it's woven into huge parts of who I am. And I'm quite proud of most of those because of what diabetes has thrown at me. And for you to say that you're sort of bringing those conversations without judgment to the table with Rocco, I think is an incredible thing to instill. Yeah, for sure. Because it does bring up so many feelings and they're confusing.
They're confusing. And, you know, sometimes he's like, oh, this is great because he's got his low snacks. And he's like, Mummy, can you make me go low? You know, and when he's like, I'm like, right, where's your bag? You know, he said the kids have had something that he's not been able to have. He'll go to his shelf and he'll get his bag of all the things that he didn't have and he'll like chomp away at them. And it might be a Tuesday and the kids are like, but we're not allowed sweets on a Tuesday. I'm like, well, you know, you had yours on Saturday. He's having his today. He's really mature in some ways. But I see that in a lot of type 1s. I think so much is stacked up against you and you've got so much to overcome in those early years of getting to grips with it mentally and physically, that once you do, it's a bit like, listen, I'm an organ. You should see what I could do, how smart I am. Like, I can do anything. And, you know, I think there is that very much feeling of this is not going to hold me back, because why should it? You know, you've got the medicine, we've got the technology, we're very lucky. And, you know, that's something that terrifies me in countries that people don't have insulin or they don't have the technology. Or, you know, we're in the Middle East and you see Gaza and I would watch that day in, day out. I've got a lot of people that work for me that were Palestinian or Lebanese that were hugely affected. Their families on the front line of what is happening. And selfishly, all I could think about is, what if Rocco didn't have insulin? How many days? And that is a real fear for me as well. Is like, my child is dependent on medicine. That's a really big thing to get your head around. Me caring for his mother is not enough. He is reliant on medicine. And we just went for his annual bloods and I'm reading all the reports and I'm just like this. You know, I just want to see that everything's in the green. And I didn't actually, I just kind of clicked because I thought, I don't want to see the name of the test in case it's serious and if it's his liver or his kidney. And I was just like, whoa. And they were pretty much all in range. And then I was like, you know, he's 7 and I'm having to worry about, is there anything more seriously wrong with him than this? Like, this is enough on its own, but the things linked to it, or if you've ever Googled it, which obviously you do, it's like, I just need to do everything I can to make sure that I hand this over to him when he is ready to deal with it. And I give him all the information. And I know as a teenager, and as you say, what you went through, he's going to go out drinking, he's going to get crazy low blood sugars, he's going to think, I want that burger, I don't care. You know, if I give him the information and try and support him the best I can and don't be that overbearing helicopter carer all the time, hopefully he will want to care for his body because it feels good. But, you know, the lady I was talking to in Selfridges, I was saying I'd seen someone with a Libre and I'm that crazy person. I'll always go up and talk to them because I love that connection of someone who just
love it.
He said, you know, this with women and young girls, the link between type 1 and eating disorders is so great because they're having to be so aware of everything that goes in. And she was saying to me that her mother also did Weight Watchers. So not only were they counting the carbs, they were counting everything, the calories and everything. So she grew up in this household of just being so obsessed with counting everything that went into her body. The toll of that mentally, and more specifically on women, is terrifying. So it's not even just the type 1 that you've got to worry about, it's everything that can be linked to it.
This episode of Type 1 is sponsored by Insulet, the makers of Omnipod tube-free insulin pump therapy. I've personally used pod therapy to manage my type 1 diabetes for years, and using Omnipod 5 automated insulin delivery has improved my diabetes management significantly with less diabetes decisions and, of course, no multiple daily injections.
How? Well, Omnipod 5 automatically adjusts my insulin every 5 minutes to help keep me in range, allowing life outside of type 1 diabetes to get bigger. If you want to find out more, head to omnipod.com.
And with that, how have you as a parent been able to process, now that you're a step removed from, the diagnosis and that whole time? You said you found this very supportive group, which is amazing. And I'm sure like creating the book was as a result of part of what you've been through as well. So I'd love to talk about that. But how are you processing all of this as it's coming up, and where do you put your boundaries in place in terms of, there's so much noise out there. We have this wealth of information now that is amazing, because I didn't have any of it, and I'm so grateful for it. And I'm sat here kind of contributing to that, hopefully in a discerning and objective and journalistic way, and in a way that helps. But for you yourself, like, how do you, as a woman of your own, away from being Rocco's mum, kind of take your own time to breathe, and where do you draw the line in terms of all the noise that's out there and other people's opinions? And kind of, you said you don't trust yourself, but what I've heard from all of this is that your instinct is on point, and you've created this life where you can make space for all of these differing feelings and challenges. And I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
I'd say as a parent of somebody with anything that's wrong with them, I do think you carry a bit of guilt, because it's come from somewhere in his gene pool. And I saw a therapist over this, but it's like, it's like, get rid of the guilt. And it's like, I don't think that will ever fully go away. I should have kept him safe, and I didn't. So finding the space to deal with that is really hard. And I think there's I limit the information. So I am on a path of balance. So I don't go heavily keto. I don't let him only eat fruit. I don't let him only drink cider vinegar. I'm like, balanced food, and his blood sugars are really good. We have a really good HbA1c, and it's trial and error. It's that acceptance, as you say. Some days are better than others. Some months are better than others. But overall, he's really healthy. So, but I always want to do better. And I am that person in life that has thrown myself into everything I've done and always got where I wanted to be through hard work. I've never had anything handed to me. I've never wanted something to be easy or for someone to make my life easier. I enjoy a challenge. And the thing I hate about type 1 the most is, no matter how hard I work at it, it's never going away. It's never going away. There's nothing I can do. No money, no time, no love, no effort, and that's really hard for me to get my head around, because I've been raised and taught myself that if I want something, if I work hard enough for it, I'll get it. And when your child's health and life hangs in the balance every day, it's really difficult to accept. So I accept sometimes it really upsets me. And when it comes to like the 3 monthly bloods, I hate going to the hospital because I always feel like we shouldn't be there. Why are we here like this? And I was talking to someone else about it. I remember leaving the hospital when he was diagnosed, and the lift was full, and it was a children's hospital, and there was some people in there, they'd had gastro, and the whole family had been struck down with it, and everyone's feeling better. And I just looked at my mum, and I was just like, this is just the start for us. Like, normally you leave hospital and you feel better. This is never going to be better. So that acceptance and that ability that if I am having a tough day with it, I'll allow myself to express that. I don't have guilt over saying this is awful or finding other parents in the same situation to moan about it with. I don't do that very often. We've got a new system at the moment, and all of the insulin is given through the phone. And I went to give him 0.5, and I've never done this in 5 years. Anyway, I gave him 0.5 that I thought, sent him off with his dad, he'd gone to golf. And then I looked at the app and I was like, why has he got 5 units of insulin on board? He's never had 5 units of insulin his whole life. I messaged his dad, and his dad's like, Abby, you gave him 5 units. You didn't give him a 0.4. And he's in the car in a traffic jam. He had 5 Manuka lollies, a packet of sweets, and that was all that was in the car. And then he rushed him into the hotel where the golf was, and he had a Fanta. So he had a great time. He's like, I'm having Fanta, yay. And I hated myself. It was like, no, I can't, you can't afford to make mistakes like that. That's his life. This is not oh, it's okay. You know, we all make mistakes. I could have killed him. And if I hadn't have looked, he would have crashed so quickly. It's a fast acting incident. And then your mind is just like, I just feel like I'm back on that diagnosis day. Like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to, this responsibility is too great.
I'm so sorry. I mean, the outcome there is that he had the time of his life with his big glass of Fanta. Yeah. But that doesn't take away your feelings and you know, so let's talk about the book, because despite all of this book, it really struck me when I read it that the message is a very hopeful one for parents and for children. So I'd love to hear kind of whether that was conscious, what drove that, you know, talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah, and listen, obviously I'm opening up about like the deepest, darkest emotions that this brings out in me, but day to day, I am very much like, we're good. I mean, depending on what the crashes happen while he's at school, that might give me a bit of a heart attack while I'm in a meeting and my phone is going off. We're good. We've got the technology. We've got the doctors. We've got so much happening. You know, insulin that you can inject, that you inject once a week, that is only reactive to glucose. Can you imagine? Can you imagine one injection and that's it?
Really not. And also, I would say, to your point there, that is my line. And I do tend to do that to people where it's suddenly like, oh, we're both in therapy right now. But I would say, like, for me, all of those feelings, knowing that this is tough and feeling actually very grateful for what I do have and the life I do live and the technology and the tools I have and the things I've been able to do, in spite of all this crap, I am so fervent in the belief that all of that can exist and does exist at once, and that is life. So sorry, interrupted you there.
I totally agree. And listen, you know, I think this is classic. Like, this is how life is. You have to hold on to all the good stuff. You have to be in the moment, because nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. Nobody, type 1 or not. So we all have to live in the moment, and we all have to appreciate what we've got and the people that we've got. And I think it makes you incredibly grateful. So for me with the book, when I was in hospital with Rocco and I'm trying to tell people what this disease is, I didn't know what it was. So I Googled it. And then I'm like, I cannot say that to anyone. I can't use those words. And my friend in Scotland sent me a book. And it was so depressing. It was on terrible paper, and the pictures were really sad, and the words were really miserable, and it was really medical. And I was like, no, I don't want to be associated with this. And I think, you know, listen, the illustrations are everything in this book for me. Like, this lady who illustrated it, she got Rocco and all of us, like, it was beautiful. And I wanted this to be a little ray of sunshine to someone that is going through something awful, that feels so isolated, because the likelihood is they don't know anyone else who's got it. They don't have any other mothers or fathers that can say to them, it's going to be okay. Listen, I've got loads of pointers for you. I'm up all night as well. Message me whenever you need, which, you know, I now have. And I wanted to say, like, it is really hard, but not too hard. Like, you're going to get through this, and your child needs to know there's so many other kids in their situation, and this is not something to be ashamed of. You know, Rocco hiding his pod and his pump, and it's like, no, I don't want that. I don't want him to be like, yeah, I've got diabetes, but I do want him to be in a room and feel like, well, I'm just the same. I've got this, you've got that. Everybody's got something. This is your thing. We deal with it. And before the book, he was really embarrassed. And when I first wrote the book, and I self-published it originally, and it looked very different, and I went into school to read it, he was so embarrassed. But the second time I came, he was maybe 2.5 years older, and he was so proud. And that made me go, oh, you know, even if, I don't care if no one buys it, Rocco feels great about this, and he's talking about his diabetes, and his friends are asking him questions, and he feels really normalized by the fact that we've talked about it. And, you know, any taboo subject, when you talk about it, you normalize it. So the more people I could get talking about diabetes with this book, the more we normalize it for our children and for anyone living with it. And I went and did some readings. I did a reading in Virgin, which was amazing. But it was such a small group of kids that gathered around. And even the lady at Virgin was like, I'm so surprised. Normally we get really big crowds. I said, I did speak to a few parents. I was like, right. And they're like, they just said it was a bit of a serious subject. And it was like, oh, Yeah, but what if it happens to you? Like, if you know knowledge is power, you can save your child's life or their friend's life. Or, I did a talk at Rocco's school when he was first diagnosed, and I knew very little, but the teacher was like, can you come in and talk about it? So I did. And a few weeks later, she messaged me and said, listen, I had this roommate. I actually didn't know they had diabetes. And she was unresponsive one night. And because of what you told me, I realized she had high blood sugar, not low blood sugar. And I would have normally given her some sugar. But because I didn't, the paramedics said I saved her life. So it's like, okay, I had one conversation with a little bit of information. So if everyone started talking about it, and, you've got people in the UK, you've got Kate Moss's daughter going out with her Dexcom on, we shouldn't be ashamed of this. Our children shouldn't be ashamed of this. It's a disease that they were given, that they live with, and they do a great job of it. So for me, it was like, this gets people talking. And one of the mums on the group sent me a message, and she was like, we bought the book, and I read it with my daughter. And she said she came over to me and she was like, oh, I'm so pleased that Abby wrote this. Like, thank you so much for everything you do for me, mummy. Like, it made her feel normal. So this is not a book. It won't teach you how to look after a diabetic child. I am not a doctor, but hopefully it will give you perspective of, this is massive and it's heavy. And, my next book, maybe it'll be around the carer burnout and the pressure that comes with the child and the guilt, but it's going to be okay. And you have to teach your child the same. They're not defined by their diabetes. I never call him a diabetic. He has diabetes. Why should he be labeled because he doesn't have a pancreas? And that's something else that I've started to say to him more and more. You're not sick. You just have one body part that doesn't work, but you're actually not sick. You don't have a pancreas. So you have something missing, but you're not sick. So don't act like you're sick. If he's going, oh. And he sometimes uses it to say, oh, I don't feel like I'm going to school today. I'm like, Rocco, your blood sugars are fine. You're going into school.
Nice try.
And I get it. But it's like, that. And then when I said it to him, I was like, you're actually not sick. You have a disease, so people think you're sick. But it shouldn't even really be called a disease. The disease part's kind of happened. It's killed your pancreas. But the rest of your body is not diseased, and you're not sick. You just have to do a bit more work to stay healthy.
Yeah, so empowering. And like you say, it puts it in all your hands. Like, yes, this has happened, but what happens now? We can decide that. We can determine that.
Yeah.
We can determine what this life looks like. And for each individual, that is different, but that's in your hands still. And I love kind of what you said there about, that group was small, but that one person then going on and knowing what to do in that situation that saved a life, that ripples and ripples and ripples. And every conversation is a conversation more where someone's taking something away from that, whether that's understanding, whether that's then something that they need to draw on in a serious situation. And that's priceless. That's absolutely invaluable. I'm wondering if this has helped you as well, because I love this side as you talk about it and the kind of force that you have there with it, but this message of hope as well. Has it helped you as well kind of process? Yeah, it's
so therapeutic. Like, selfishly, it's so therapeutic. And when I meet somebody who's got a newly diagnosed child, like my friend Mariam, like, we've formed such an instant friendship. And we'd met 10 years ago. We didn't form a friendship. We met again, and it was like, we mess each other all the time. And I am more open with her than I probably would be with a lot of my friends about a lot of things, because it strips away so much, doesn't it? And it gets you at your most vulnerable. And I love talking to her, and I love it when she'll ask me a question and I can give her an answer and it helps her, because I still feel like a bit of a fraud. I'm like, do I really know what I'm doing? I kind of do. But when you can help somebody else, I think it's such a rewarding feeling. And you see a mother just take a breath. I remember one of the ladies on the group came to me when I was 5 days past diagnosis. She came to the house and she brought her little girl who was a year older than Rocco. And she had a low, I think her daughter went to 50. And she was just carried on talking to me, and she gives her something. And I was like this. Like, every part, this alarm and low, and what's going to happen? Oh my God. And she was just casual. And I was like, I will never be like that. Like, how does she be so calm? And now we talk all the time. And she'll be like, I've had an awful night. I hate this. And it's like, we all go through those moments of feeling really in control and really out of control. But that is also life. That is life. That is, and it sets you up to go, none of this really matters. And I think you said it earlier, like stripping away all that stress that is just inconsequential, doesn't matter. Let go of that and let's focus on what needs my attention. And I do think diabetes takes up such a big part of your brain. I would say it's 50% of my brain is always consumed consciously, subconsciously, and probably for you it's more because it's happening to you. But I am not capable or able to fill my brain as I was, or to work at the speed I was, or the capacity I was. I'm way more tired. My mental energy is way less, and my ability to handle stress is less. So it's like, okay, I'm full, shut down. Whereas before there was so much more space.
The finessing of like, this is not important to my life, and actually I have my health to protect.
Yes.
And you're raising my cortisol level, so
goodbye.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Like sorry not sorry, basically. That's been a big piece of the puzzle for me, and quite rightly so. And again, that's something that I'm like, gosh, I would have never probably have got to that point, not to say like everything has a silver lining, but for me that's like a huge key to my life now, is what matters, what really matters. I appreciate silly little things, because when the diabetes noise in my head does quieten down, I'm like, I mean, the sky's blue today. I feel great. Like, it's so ridiculous. But but again, it's this dichotomy. It kind of exists alongside, like you say, this constant something in the back of your head, or what have you forgotten? What should you be thinking about now? There's always that, like, not quite switched off. Yeah. Oh my goodness. This conversation has been so therapeutic for me.
Same.
So very selfishly putting this podcast out there, but even like, and you said, does this help? Do I know enough? I think even just normalizing these conversations is so powerful for people, because a lot of people out there never get to have these conversations. And you putting the book out there in the world is kind of opening up a space for that. So incredible. Where can people find you? Where can people find the book? Where should they head to find out more about Abby and your world and Rocco and everything?
Okay. So Rocco's Instagram is What Is Diabetes. So that's our Instagram handle. So you can find us on there. And then the book is available on Amazon. It's available in the UK, the US and the UAE, and then some bookshops around the world as well.
Amazing. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, just thank you for having me on. Like people like you being out there having these conversations. I think there's so much information that is from a medical perspective, and I don't think it massively helps. I think somebody living it, feeling it, understanding it does so much good in the world. And I think for you as a role model for all these young girls out there being diagnosed and listening to you talk, and you live a really normal life, you travel the world, you achieve so much, I think it's really inspiring. So thank you for sharing this with me. Like, I've been really happy to be here.
Thank you. You've inspired me an incredible amount today, and I've no doubt that that's the same for the listeners as well. So thank you so much. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Type 1-on-1. Please remember that nothing you hear on this podcast should be taken as medical advice. I'm definitely not a healthcare professional. If you like what you hear, hit subscribe and do leave a little review on iTunes if you have time. It really helps to spread the word about type 1 diabetes. And thank you so much for listening.